As dads, some days we feel like we have all the answers, and some days we feel like we don't have a clue. If that describes you, you're at the right place. This is the All Pro Dad Podcast. Hey everybody, I'm your host Ted Lowe, and each week on the All Pro Dad Podcast, we ask just one question. We explore the answers, talk about what we've gotten wrong mostly, talk about what we've gotten right occasionally, and what the experts say. And then we end every episode with a simple but powerful pro move. Today, I am joined with my friends, Mr. Bobby Lewis.
Hey man, what's going on?
How you doing, bud?
Good.
Mr. Jason Hood.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for being here. And Bobby, let's just dive in. What is our question of the episode?
How do I handle my kids' emotional roller coaster? Our favorite ride as dads, right? How do we handle it?
Oh, yes. And we've got kids in all ages and stages. So there's all different types of emotions and rides.
Yeah, I've got kids in like 3 different stages of life. I've got a 4-year-old. So she's still kind of in the... I'm learning my own voice. I'm going to throw a fit if I want to. A 9-year-old who very emotional, and then 13-year-old who, I don't know if you've known this or not, but 13-year-olds can be emotional as well. So we got all different types of emotions in our house.
There's a lot of emotions going on represented at this table, right? So many things. That's a great question. But before we dive in, what were you taught about emotions as a kid? Or better yet, how did you handle your own emotions as a kid? What kind of kid were you? Were you calm? Did you act out? What was your thing?
No, I was all over the place. I was hyperactive. I was the kid that just did whatever came to mind immediately. No thought to anything, just do, right? That's my son too, to a T. So I call my mom often and I'm so sorry. but yeah, that was me. My emotions were up and down, and I don't think I got a lot of I don't know if I got a lot of coaching. I definitely didn't from my dad. I feel like he still struggles with kind of expressing his emotions, except for anger. He's pretty good at that one, which I'm good at too. So it's not like a call out. It's like something we get honest as hoods, I guess. But yeah, I don't think we ever talked about emotions. I think I remember one time my mother, and I might have shared this on another episode, but my mother sat down with me one time and was just like, what am I doing wrong? And had a notepad and just wrote down like everything, and I just exploded on her. Mm-hmm. And so
how old were you at this point?
I was in high school. So I was probably sophomore, junior in high school.
Like, what am I doing wrong as your mom?
Yeah. She's just our relationship was combative, I think, a little bit. I was growing up. My dad lived in a different place. I only saw him, every other weekend or so, if that, at that point. And, I think I was kind of didn't know, as most teens, you don't know who you are. You're kind of stuck in this, I want to be treated like an adult, but I still want to act like a kid kind of phase. And
so what is she seeing in you? Like, for her to take a notebook and going, from an emotional standpoint, Jason's really fill in the blank.
Yeah, I think she was, I don't know. You can ask her. I'm sure she would love to be on the podcast. I'm her only one. So she's like, she listens. So hi, Mom, if you're listening. But I think for her, it was maybe a little bit of desperation is what it seemed like to me. Is like, what do I have to do to get this kid to know that I love him? I'm on his side. I want us to have a good relationship. I don't know if she got advice from somebody, but I just remember it being very powerful for me. It made me appreciate her on a whole different level. It was kind of a turning point for me and her, with just the way I don't know if my actions displayed it, but in my heart, I felt like, okay, my mom she spent a couple hours just listening to me just rant and probably I don't remember, she might remember better, but maybe mean to her, maybe yell at her, but I just remember pouring out and her just taking notes.
Was she seeing a lot of anger from you at that point?
Yeah, I probably a lot of annoying, like, oh, my mom's just annoying. Like she's just aggravating me all the time.
So frustrated. She's seeing, he's frustrated. He's angry and annoyed.
I don't know. It's hard for me to remember. I remember that moment and it being a turning point for our relationship.
Yeah, I wasn't that way as a kid. I wasn't really high or low on many things. I maybe naturally apathetic, not because I didn't care about things totally. just kind of went with the flow. I mean, do you remember getting frustrated because I was a planner and I like to organize things out, and I really would get frustrated when the plan didn't come together. Like, I remember that. And if it was someone else who caused the plan to not come together, they were public enemy number one to me. I was like, you are a jerk. What's wrong with you? Why did you drop the ball when I threw it to first base? that sort of stuff.
So what did frustration look like for you when the plan wasn't going? Because you are so, like, when you're describing yourself as a kid, it doesn't surprise me at all. You are so even keeled. I love it. So what about as a kid? What did frustration look like for you?
I think I would get upset in the moment. It would burn off fast, 30 seconds, and I just move on.
What's upset look like? Like outwardly?
When I was a kid, I really don't remember like how I expressed it. I think it was just internalized it, and just really got mad, steam coming out my ears type of, the cartoon where everyone gets frustrated. And then after that, once it blew off in 30 seconds, I just move on,
Well, it's probably not going to be a big shocker for you guys to hear. I was a little volatile with my emotions growing up. I was a very expressive, frustrated, angry, happy, a lot of emotions, a lot of big emotions, kind of back and forth, even from being a tantrum thrower as a baby. Like, my grandparents would tell stories. They went on vacation with us once because of me. Lots of stories there. And then as a teenager, it was just a lot of anger and a lot of frustration. And so that was...
Yeah, I'm listening to you guys talking. I'm not even bothered by that though. Like, I wish I was more like you guys when I was a kid than myself, where I just wouldn't really tell anybody. I'd be frustrated or I'd have these emotions, but I just would never let it out. It probably would have been a lot more helpful to be your mom getting the truth out of you, or, hearing from others like exactly how you feel than probably people on the outside looking at me thinking he's fine, when I really was probably upset about a lot of things,
Good point.
It was one of those things where while I was that expressive or whatever, frustrated, no one, I had people that loved me. My mom passed away when I was 10, but there were still lots of people that loved me. After those times, no one would circle back and ask me anything. Like, hey, that was a big deal. Like, what's going on? Like, no one said, what's going on? It was like, stop it. You cannot do that. You need to get yourself under control. I would get the same question you would get. What were you thinking?
Yeah, what are you thinking?
What are you thinking?
So I'm guessing for you guys, because it sounds like you both kind of caused the roller coaster when you were kids. When you're now dads and your kids are on the roller coaster, you probably can relate to it a little better. For me, since I didn't really have those super highs and super lows, now when I have a child who comes to me and they're just the highest of highs and lowest of lows, it's taken a little bit of practice for me to figure it out. I still don't even necessarily know how to handle it, because I'm like, I never did that as a kid, and I'm not the highest of high, lowest of low guy. So I'm watching my kids ride this roller coaster now, and I'm thinking, what in the world am I supposed to do with this kid right now?
Bobby, what if the research is correct? And I'm not an expert on this, but I've done some research on it. Actually, your calm nature is more what an emotional kid needs, because the research shows that we know this, you pass your emotions back and forth like a ball. You can be in the car with your wife and you can tell something's up, or you can be with people have this mirrored neurons where it's like, if somebody walks in and they're anxious, it makes you anxious. If somebody walks in and smiles, it makes you smile. And so when our kids, we tend to mirror their emotions. And I got told I couldn't have them. And so my daughter is so much like me. Her name's Teddy, and my daughter calls us the Teds. And we actually, because we are so much alike, those emotions, like she comes in and she's anxious and I catch the anxiety ball. So it can be, we catch that. So whatever your kid is, we tend to pick up on that.
Yeah.
What about for you?
No, I would agree, because my son, he's kind of the same way I was. And so he loses control and he gets mad, or he gets frustrated, or and a lot of times I'm just like, I don't know why I kind of internalize it and say, okay, this is partially my fault, because it's and now I'm on the defense all of a sudden because he is acting the way he is, and so now I've not only blamed myself, but I'm like getting defensive and telling him he can't act like that, and we have to be able to control ourselves and things like that. But really, it's my own insecurity, I think, that's driving it. It's like, I don't want you to struggle in this way the same way I struggled, and so now I'm desperate in my emotion to like fix it in the moment. And I have to remember, like, I just, you have to breathe. I have to breathe a lot in parenting him because he's a lot like me. And as soon as he gets up here, I have a tendency, because that's my nature, to go there too. And so it doesn't help him at all in those situations. So I have to actually try to slow it down.
Look at it be Bobby.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
I think this is one of the most difficult parts of parenting. And there's a lot of difficult parts to parenting, obviously. But the highs and the lows, I think we all naturally just would love it to be even keel, right in the middle all the time. If we could just all be smooth, that'd be awesome. But it doesn't work out that way. And so we'll go through afternoons where my son, who's 9, he will hit the lowest of lows and the highest of highs within an hour. And I'm like, buddy, how did you swing so far? Like, not much has changed. But I think everything matters to him so much that, you know, he just accepts everything as the worst possible or the best possible. And that can get frustrating to me, especially my attitude where it's like, nothing's the worst and nothing's the best.
Yeah.
Everything is in the middle. And so it's so weird to me. He'll come in, he's like, oh man, I can't believe it. Like, I broke my toy. I'm like, it's a Lego. Stick it back together. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, is that
it's
how
like
you,
it's supposed to break. It's fine.
Is that your tendency wanting to go, buddy? Like, I mean, so
it's weird because everything is big, whether it's big good or big bad. And so I have to kind of remind myself that in their little world, this is the worst thing that's happened in a long time.
Good.
Or this is the best thing that's happened in a long time. And I have to remind myself that, like, they haven't lived, you know, decades. They've lived a couple of years. And so just the timeline is different for them. They haven't experienced like super serious things in many cases. And so what is serious to them really should be treated that way for me too. I should treat it the same way, you know?
I love that, Bobby. So what's a big deal to them should be a big deal to us.
It should be a big deal to me too. And I think the reason it should be, and I found this to be the case when we've had conversations with my son, is that minimizing it makes it worse. It makes him feel like his emotions aren't valid because they're not my emotions. And I don't want that to be the case, because then inevitably he's going to say, well, I guess I'm just not going to express them at all because dad either doesn't care about it as deeply as I do, or I'm making too big of a deal about it. So I'll just shove it down. And I don't want that to be the case.
That's interesting, because as you were talking, I was thinking about, but do we need to go, you know, I think you're right. And I guess what I was trying to ask in my head while you were talking was, you know, if something isn't a big deal, how do you validate their emotions but not go there with them at the same time? As like, oh, this is really a big deal. I don't know. I just think about that with Hawkins. Sometimes it's just like he, you know, overreacts. And if I went there with him, right, I'm going really bad, versus like, where do I go? Do I go all the way down with him? No, but you're saying validate their emotions.
Yeah, and I think you can do that by consciously trying to remind yourself to stay in the middle, stay even keeled. So if they're down low, you know, hold on to the middle and pull them back up.
Yeah.
And if they're really, really high, you're like, all right, hold on to the middle and pull them a little bit back down. So you're kind of in the middle zone as much as possible, because I think it can be dangerous both ways. If it's constantly the end of the world when something doesn't go their way, well, things are not going to go their way a lot in life.
Yeah.
You can't live down there. And if you're like overcompensating for like, this is the greatest thing ever, like, okay, you made your own sandwich. Like, you know, that's probably not the greatest accomplishment you're going to have. And let's come back down. You just can't go high and low too much. I think in the middle is the safest, healthiest place to be emotionally. And spikes are good. I mean, you can have spikes here and there, but don't live in the spikes.
Yes, we need to be calm. I think one of the things that I'm learning is, well, we know it with our spouses when they're upset and we go, you just need to calm down. Never in the history of marriage has that been a good idea. And I don't think so much with our kids, just say, you just need to calm down. And I think it begins with empathy. And what's so fascinating about the research on this is I've read a study about how police officers are trained to de-escalate things. And they can say things, I can tell you are really frustrated with your wife right now. I can see that you're frustrated. And they were talking about some, even as they were intoxicated, this empathy, or you've recognized that I am upset. I have this emotion about this topic. I am frustrated with my wife for doing and with her kids. I can tell you are very upset about this Lego. So you're in, and they're like, you get the emotion and you get the topic. So it's empathy and it's calm, but it's not cold. And it's a lot of times that's full stop. Now, here's what we're not saying. So dads are like, oh, so we just let it go. What empathy does is it brings them from the emotional part of their brain to the logical part of their brain. That's what empathy pulls it. They're not our logic of why they're being illogical, which is just such an ironic thing, right? The empathy brings them to logic instead of logic bringing them to logic. And I think once they're at a logical point, then you're able to go, okay, bud, that it's okay to be upset, but it's not okay to be nasty. That was one of the things we had. Our middle son, he's still shy. And, we would say, hey, bud, it's okay to be shy, but it's not okay to be nasty. Because he would, very young, just if someone would speak to it, he would just respond with, stop it. Like he doesn't like a lot of attention. He doesn't want his eyes focused on them. So I think it's acknowledging that.
I say that a lot because we homeschool our kids, and my wife does the lion's share of the homeschooling. And so she is sitting with them on the couch. They're reading stuff, they're doing their math, and I'll work from home some days as well. So I'll kind of help out. And I've noticed that my son does this when he doesn't want to do something. You're aware of it. He's not hiding. Yeah. And so we'll say, all right, well, I know you don't love math, but that's part of school today. We're doing math. And so he'll get super frustrated, especially if his expectation was we're doing 3 pages of math and the assignment was 4. Like all of a sudden, this is not fair. You're being mean, that sort of stuff that kids do.
Messing with the plan. Like, Dad.
I get that. And I resonate with that. But what'll happen sometimes is he'll get upset. He'll like throw his pencil. I'm like, that's not okay. You're allowed to be upset. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to have your emotions, but it can't tick over the line to the point where you're either calling mom names or you're throwing your pencil or you're just disobeying whatever we've asked you to do. It's okay to feel it. It's not okay to like overreact in your feelings. And that's one thing that we've dealt with. And he's getting better about it. I think these constant conversations over and over again, they get it and they start to learn. But I don't think we can heap too much expectation on the developing mind to, they're trying to figure out their emotions just like we are. We're riding the roller coaster with them.
That's good. And did you guys hear that growing up? It's okay to feel frustrated. It's okay to feel sad, because I didn't know.
I didn't know.
I think stereotypically boys are taught, and we'll talk about this in a whole episode, is that boys were taught that anger is the only acceptable emotion.
Yeah. Don't cry. Never cry.
Yeah. So we're going to have a whole episode about
suck
that.
It up. Yeah. I heard be a man a lot at 8.
I'm 6.
8, 9, 10. It's like, really?
I mean, there's so many messages for guys, but to say it's okay to feel a certain way. I mean, I guarantee there's dads listening right now going, hold on a minute. We've just entered into some kind of on a weak land, but it's not that at all.
Every emotion that you have is a natural one. I don't think I was told that when I was little. I was told, okay, you can be mad or whatever, don't cry. Like get over it. Suck it up. Move on. Right. That's sort of like you're allowed to have these emotional reactions because God gave them to you. They're natural. Like you're not a robot. Like you're allowed to be sad. You're allowed to be upset. You're allowed to be frustrated. Don't tell your kids they can't be what God designed them to be.
Well, and two, when somebody's crying and upset about something, that's not where they want to be.
No.
When they're angry about something, it's not where they want to be. They don't want to be angry. They don't want to be sad. They don't want to be crying. They may want to be happy, but I think about that as I used to do this when he was really young, is tell him, hey, stop crying. And I'm like, it finally clicked with me one day. I was just like, wait a minute, he's not crying because he wants to cry. He's crying because he's upset about something. And me telling him not to cry or to calm down doesn't help at all, because the person is like, if I could, I would stop crying if I could. I would calm down if I could. But there's a difference between letting your emotions overtake you and being able to control your emotions. And kids, they certainly can't control them.
I don't think enemy is probably the wrong word, but the emotion is not the enemy. Like the circumstance is probably the enemy, if you're going to use that word. We shouldn't be getting, frustrated or angry with our children for expressing whatever is the natural repercussion of the circumstance they're currently in.
Right.
Someone hurt their feelings and you say, get over it. Like that's not okay. We've got to figure out a way to like allow them to ride the roller coaster but not fall off.
That's great, Bobby. I think, and we've talked about a whole episode on empathy, and it is so powerful. But one of the phrases that I wish I'd have known so much earlier is just to say, you're upset and that's understandable. You're afraid and that's understandable. You want your own way. I get it. Sometimes I want my own way, and that's understandable. If I'm sitting here listening to you guys and Dad's listening, and I almost get emotional about it. Speaking of emotions, if I could go back and sit down with me, this would be one of the biggest things that I would have, because my approach to emotions were that there was this lane that you could stay in. You could be angry, but you couldn't be too expressive about it. But other than that, there was no other emotion. Even with being excited, it had to be tapped down to a certain level. And so my thing is, when anything got out of that lane, it was try to fix it. It's my biggest struggle even now. And so what I would do is try to fix my kid emotion. And I'd love to just sit down and go, hey, you know what? Tell them it's okay to feel the way they feel, but it's not okay to do X, Y, Z. And sometimes, it's okay to feel what you want to feel. Done. Full stop. Like if they're not doing anything that deserves any kind of consequences and they're just sad, don't try to fix that they're sad. Let them be sad. No one ever taught me that, and I wish that they had. And I'm learning it now. and my daughter said to me the other day, now that we've done the podcast, I keep coming back to her going, I did this and this and this. And she goes, Dad, I need you to knock that off. Yeah. You're doing so much better than my friend's parents at college. And I was like, that's not the game I'm playing here, sweetheart. Yeah. But it is one of those things, dads, I would just say so passionately, this is a big deal. And this is not about letting our kids off the hook. This just gets them to a place where they can hear you enough for you to say what it is you want to say. So it's be calm. Don't tell them to be calm. Be empathetic. There's this thing of being strong, that my dad is strong with me, and he's strong emotionally. Because when you see dads out of control, that is emotional weakness. Yeah. Dad is strong, but dad is steady. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is such a huge thing for dads to go. Angry dads that are overexpressive are not steady dads. They're not in emotional control. So if we're wanting our kids to have solid emotions when ours are all over the place, it's sending a really bizarre message. I am pointing no fingers at everyone else. I just know that it's true. Is we want our kids to go, I can come to dad and it's going to be okay. I think there's a lot of dads right now that are listening going, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm angry, Dad. And I see my anger as part of my strength. Well, one, I think it starts with realization is no, that's not a strength. And you want a kid to grow up to be angry and go, but what do we do differently? It is giving yourself space and breath. The more I have never regretted a moment as a dad when I paused and took a breath. Yeah. And the angrier you are, the more space you're going to need. And I've told my kids before, especially when they got older, going, I'm going to need a minute. And my oldest one wants to talk about it right then. And he goes, I want to talk about it now. And I go, you don't. You really don't. So angry dad, if you're listening, and we can all do that, probably most of us can do that. It's just taking a big breath and allowing your emotional part of your brain to calm down and come to the logical thing. The logical person, that dad that's listening to this right now is going, hey, I want to do that better. When you're angry, that part of your brain is out to lunch. So give yourself the space to calm down is probably the biggest thing.
Yeah. Kids are going to mimic what we do.
They do.
If we don't want to have overly emotional, too high, too low kids, we can't be that.
Absolutely.
We have to model as best we can, like appropriate emotional responses to situations. I don't want my son 20 years from now. I keep talking about him because he's the more emotional of the three kids that I have. But I keep thinking, like, I don't want him 15, 20, however many years from now to be the worst example that I set for him. Like, I want him to be the best example that I set for him. And so that takes intentionality,
Yeah, I think, and that actually is what creates, some anxiety in me sometimes. I'm thinking about his future self. It's like, who's he going to be when he's 16, when he's 18, when he's 25, when he's getting married? Like I think about that, and sometimes, because I get frustrated, and I am still here and still dealing with some of that, of trying to control my own emotions, and I know that is reflective on his behavior and how he responds to things. And so it for me, I would call myself a somewhat angry dad at times. And just, I think for me, it is taking a minute to just step away from the situation. And I don't do it as often as I should, quite frankly. But whenever I do, when I do take a minute, it makes a huge difference on, coming to the table with empathy. And again, it's like when things happen to our kids, we want them to understand like, hey, it's understandable that you feel that way, but you don't have to feel that way. Like for instance, if somebody's ugly to you, you don't want them to always be in a state of sadness because somebody's ugly to them. You want to teach them, hey, that them being ugly to you has nothing to do with you and who you are.
Value, yeah.
Your value is not. So there's lessons like that you teach them in those moments as well. It's like, hey, it's understandable that you feel that way, but let me correct the way you're thinking about this a little bit. And so, but every time I take a breath, every time I step away, it makes a world of a difference with my communication.
It's so good.
Yeah. Every outburst is a teaching moment.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, before you jump to the pro move, I think it's just important to acknowledge, I think as people are listening to this weekly, hopefully, there's probably episodes where you're going, hey, I'm doing pretty good at that. Or I feel good at that. I'm just guessing that this is probably one of those episodes that dads are going, ooh.
Yeah.
And so if you're feeling like that, dads, you are sitting with hear from three other dads who get it. But just be encouraged. If you're like us, no one's taught you this stuff and this is new and you're taking a first step. So well done.
Yeah.
Well done. This has become such an important thing that we're learning and seeing, and it's a gap for a lot of dads. I know it has been for me. We're going to do an entire episode on sons and how to build their emotional muscles.
Yeah.
And so we'll do that in the future. So kind of lock in.
Well, our sons are going to become dads and we want our grandkids to be taken care of someday. So we got to teach our kids today, our sons, how to handle these situations so that they can take care of our grandkids.
That's good, Bobby. That's good. So, Bobby, what is our pro move of the episode?
Pro move. This week, watch how your kids' emotions impact your emotions. Do you get high when they get high? Do you get low when they get low? Watch it this week and see how you react.
That's good. So just watching, that's good. Observing that, that's good stuff. Well, thank you guys.
For sure.
And listeners, as always, thank you for listening. We know you and your kids will be glad you did. See you next time. Thanks for listening to the All Pro Dad podcast. All Pro Dad is the fatherhood program of the nonprofit Family First. Along with our motherhood program, iMom, we exist to help you love your family well. Subscribe to our daily email, the All Pro Dad Play of the Day, by going to allprodad.com/subscribe and get daily powerful and practical fatherhood tips in your inbox. The All Pro Dad podcast is hosted by me, Ted Lowe, produced by Bobby Lewis.